Hello, I'm Nandita, and as part of my advanced public policy course with Takshashila, I'm creating a series of podcasts where we sit down with experts in the field of climate change and we break down climate change treaties and policies, and we look at how these global or national or subnational policies can affect local uh, livelihoods, how they can affect local events and the changes that they can or cannot create. So, the structure that I have tentatively planned is to look at it from a top down perspective. First, we look at the global treaty, uh, the Paris Agreement, and we look at how treaties such as the Paris Agreement on a global level, with all countries participating, how they can affect local policies in ground level in India. India is the context of all of these podcast series as well. So the structure that I've taken is that I will first go through the treaty, the policy, or the document, create an understanding of for myself, my interpretation of the policy, and that will first come out as a blog. Following that, I invite experts from the field of climate change, and then we sit down and dissect the policy together over a span of 15 to 20 minutes as a podcast episode. Okay, so in today's session, we're going to be looking at the scope of localization in large global treaties like the Paris Agreement. And by the scope of localization, what I mean is how much opportunity do these treaties allow for local policies to shape in a way that it responds to local community needs? So, the first question that I have, since I've been using the word localization a lot, is that when we talk about something as localizing the Paris Agreement, what does it actually mean to you?
Okay, thanks. So that's actually a very interesting question because to some extent, if you look at the way the UN treaties are made, Paris Agreement is one of the most local to global kind of an agreement because think about how it is structured. The framework is something which is agreed upon by all the country representatives, and that is how all UN treaties are made. It is all consensus based, which means that it is not majority's decision, but all the governments have to agree. And in an ideal world, if all the country governments actually represented, because I mean, if these were elected governments, all of them, then they would represent the voices of their citizens, and those will reflect ideally in any UN treaty. But that's not how it works. There are dictatorial governments, and even the elected governments often represent more their donors than their voters, and so on and so forth. So it's not a very perfect arrangement, although theoretically it can be. But if you look at Paris Agreement, what to do under Paris Agreement? I mean, once the framework is decided that you have to keep the global warming below 2 degrees centigrade by 2100, but how to achieve that? Each country has given its own voluntary commitments,
Yeah.
right? Which means that the operationalization of Paris Agreement is already in such a way that every country government is deciding how they are going to do it in their country. So there is that local element which is coming in there. Now, interestingly, some of the countries, I mean, how the NDCs have been put together, if you look at that, in some countries, there were national sort of consultations or discourses. There were open platforms where people were asked to, send their opinion as to how that country's NDC should be designed, what should go in that. So those are the countries where we can say that even the NDCs reflect the local realities. In some cases, there were consultations with the local CSOs, if not, general open to public kind of a thing, but at least the non-profit organizations which work with people, their opinions were taken into consideration. But there are some countries where the NDCs have been put together with the help of some hired consultants within the ministries and things like that. So it has unfolded differently in each country, but again, this is the way this whole mechanism has come together. There is at least the theoretical possibility that local concerns could reflect in the NDCs and therefore in the Paris Agreement. So it's because of the architecture of the agreement, this link is definitely possible here. Hasn't happened in all the countries, but in some places it has.
So, since we're talking so much about the local and the global targets or the NDCs as well, do you think local serves the global, or if the global should serve the local needs, like in that dialogue?
Hmm. So, particularly in the context of climate change, it has to be both ways. Because on one hand, this is a global problem,
Yeah.
and therefore all the local efforts have to, contribute towards solving a global problem and maintaining the conditions on earth suitable or amenable for global human civilization and global human economy to survive and thrive and so on. But at the same time, you cannot assume that this whole idea, which is often part of the conventional development dialogue, that you can sacrifice the good of a small community for the greater good of the majority. That is not really the right way of looking at it. We also have to, we have that ethical responsibility to ensure that every individual's quality of life should be above a certain level, and everybody should have the right to live a dignified life and make progress and so on. So that is why the global targets should not trample on individual rights. But at the same time, all the local efforts should contribute to meeting that global need, because unless we meet that global need, each one of us are going to suffer anyway. So climate change is that kind of a phenomenon where it has to be both ways.
Mhm.
And perhaps it is true of all global issues that UN generally deals with.
Yeah. So, but my question then would be, what if there's a discrepancy between what the global target is and what people actually need? Because the global target is on behalf of these people.
Mhm. So yes, those conflicts are always there, and we come across them on a daily basis as people involved in climate action. Um, uh, that on one hand, you want your country's contribution to anthropogenic carbon dioxide to be minimal in order to address the basic issue of global warming. But in order to do that, you have to then, you need to make a very rapid transition in some of the economic activities. And how do you then do that without impacting people's lives? The very common example of this is, if you want to, ideally, the use of mineral coal should stop across the world. But then what happens to the entire economy, which is based on mining, processing, transporting, and using mineral coal? What happens to coal miners? For example, and the entire economy that has grown around coal mining towns. And if this shift, like tomorrow, if all coal mines are to be shut down, then what are we going to do with all these people tomorrow? That is the harsh reality that we have to deal with. But in a way, we have created this situation uh, ourselves, in the sense that climate change is not something which has happened yesterday. It's a phenomenon which has been happening over 200 years.
Yeah.
Climate scientists pointed out that these changes are happening way back in 1960s and 70s. The international negotiations around climate change started in 1990s. The first global agreement happened way back in 1997. The evidence of climate science has been slowly building up over the last nearly 100 years now. And so we have known with at least 10 to 20-year lead time what kind of impacts are going to happen in different locations, what actions need to be taken in order to really solve this problem. So it is because governments have typically dragged their feet and not solved the problem when it was actually manageable, did not put in place safeguards about climate change impacts in order to protect the people. So that is the reason why we are now in this dilemma where actions need to happen with a very short preparatory period, and therefore a lot of people are going to suffer. So uh, even with the climate disasters that happen, like recently with the in the monsoon season, practically half of the country was underwater,
Yeah.
and everywhere the response from the government administration was common, that this was unprecedented rainfall, and therefore we could not handle it.
Yeah.
It was unprecedented, but it was not unexpected. I
Yeah.
mean, for 15 years, scientists have been telling that the rainfall pattern is changing in such a way that you are going to have cloud bursts, you are going to have episodes of very heavy rainfall. So, what safeguards have been put in place? None. So, in a way, it is also a matter of holding the local politicians and bureaucracy accountable.
Mm.
If the coal miners are losing their livelihoods, then it is now the ethical responsibility of the local government to ensure that they get reskilled, find new jobs, and till then to give them at least the basic amenities that they need to survive. That falls on the government's head, and it cannot be looked upon as a favor or as a dole. We are having to do it because the administration did not fulfill its responsibilities in the like with long term planning and so on. So that is number one. But secondly, we also have to ask ourselves why. I mean, why is it that the governments typically have been unresponsive? And that is the reason, the main reason of that is the huge influence that petroleum and coal companies have on the politics of each country across the world. And there are now evidences that the petroleum company scientists actually knew about climate change even as back as 1950s, but they suppressed the data, and therefore it did not come in the public domain till 1970s. So it is then ultimately the responsibility lies with these people who are benefiting from putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and therefore they do not want these processes to change and are trying to, and have always been trying to sort of stretch it to the last moment, when ultimately the change will happen when there is no other option left. It is the conventional energy companies and the political establishment which has been funded by these guys. These are the main people who are, or main systems who are accountable for creating this near impossible situations now. And somewhere, I mean, somebody has to show the mirror to these people and make them, at least pick up the bill for these rapid changes now.
Do you think the Paris Agreement, as a conclusionary question, do you think the Paris Agreement in some way was that mirror? Like, did it influence decision and policy making on a national level at least?
To some extent, yes. In spite of all the issues with slow action and changing politics, like what has happened in US. Every time Democrats are in power, they are back in the Paris Agreement. When Republicans come in power, they are out of Paris Agreement. This kind of nonsense has been happening there. Other countries also, depending on who is in power, they will be full-fledgedly going ahead or stepping back. So, in spite of all of this, if you look at the data, when Kyoto Agreement failed, and there was a period of 3 4 years where when there was no global agreement on anything, that was a very very dark period for all climate activists. So if you look at the projections from climate scientists till say around 2015 is when Paris Agreement was signed. uh, all those projections were telling us that by 2100, the average temperature of the planet will be 5 to 6 degrees warmer than the pre-industrial era. Now, after the Paris Agreement, the moment all the NDCs are on table, that projection came down to about 3 degrees centigrade. And that is where we are headed currently based on what actions are actually happening on the ground. So there is some progress.
Yeah.
From 6 degrees centigrade, we have come down to a 3 degrees centigrade projection. Of course, in order to ensure that the damage is not so much that there is a danger for the entire global civilization to collapse, we have to get, I mean, 3 degrees centigrade is also quite large. We
Yeah.
have to get it down to between at least below 2 degree, ideally 1.5, but at least below 2 degrees centigrade. But right now, even if you add all the provisions in all the indices and assume that everybody actually fulfills their commitment, then we are getting close to that number. We are going somewhere around 1.8 or something. So, of course, I mean, that's an unrealistic expectation given the way the world politics operates. But again, that theoretical possibility is there, which means that it is that target is reachable, which was not the case before 2015. So I would say that Paris Agreement definitely has given us some progress. The only concern is that it is not fast enough, and therefore we are not 100% sure that we are, going to meet that target. That is the big problem.
Yeah. Uh, Thank you so much, Priya, for talking about the localization of Paris Agreement. I mean, I learned a lot about it through this conversation, although I had separately read about it and written a blog as well. So that is
Mhm.
the hope of this entire dialogue, trying to talk to experts to understand from a very learned perspective as compared to the internet. So thank you so much for that. I'll just stop the recording.
Yeah, so I mean the one thing that I would say in this is that ultimately, if we want to negate the influence of the petroleum companies and ensure that this whole process truly becomes localized, I think the role of voters and citizens in all the countries is going to be the key. And that how that unfolds over the next 10 to 15 years, that will really decide the fate
Yeah.
of humanity for the next couple of 100 years. That's the situation now.
Yeah. So it is really in our hands.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Thank you.